the circulation.
Mr. Handy, I would like to begin to get into the whole aspect of audio and visual education and selling, if I may say so. And two of your very earlier associations, and I'd like to know the methods you used in those days, I believe were with the National Cash Register Company as well as International Harvester. Isn't that right?
Yes. The International Harvester Association came about on the fact that people wouldn't come to see their merchandise. We had, by that time, were extending our sales promotion methods on the Chicago Tribune to information on for national advertisers, retailers. The equipment which the International Harvester Company made couldn't be put into the counters, shall we say,
surely,
or exhibit. You had to take the prospective buyer, or rather, I should say, you couldn't take the prospective buyer to it, generally speaking, and show it what it was good for. You had to take it to the buyer.
Well, was this then when you devised the rather large slides that you first began to use?
No, our first method was demonstration.
I see.
To train the salesman to take them out to the farmer and show the farmer what they do for him. It was an extension of the principle we'd used at retail, and it worked effectively. As for John Patterson, he was making a new appliance, an office appliance, a cash register, particularly a store utility that also called for demonstration, and he was far ahead of anything that I knew anything about, because I thought in terms only of informing and enthusing, and he thought in terms of demonstrating. In fact, the Harvester Company people thought I was smart because of what I learned from him, and he thought I was smart because of what I was learning from the Harvester people.
Sure about.
Right from that standpoint. But he believed in visual communication in an elementary way. He used matches to represent people. He'd lay them down on the counter in order to hold the attention of the person whom he was talking to. And from that he got into making glass slides of these matchmen and their relationships as suggested by the little match figures that he'd laid out on the horizontal plane. Started making slides, and with the inspiration of the so-called Chinese picture language of some 3,900 characters they were supposed to have at that time, he started making a library of slides of all the various relationships in which people could get in selling situations, particularly, but also human relations of every kind. And of course, that was tinder to my flame. He had 25,000 slides, a library, with which he would illustrate talks that he would make.
I think, Mr. Handy, you once said that what goes in one eye doesn't go out the other.
And generally, I think that's a true statement, yes. Of course, it's put the emphasis on the fact that we can't so well depend on the ear, or depend on the ear alone. I believe in ears. I wear them. And I notice that other people do and make use of them.
Yes, they hold my glasses out very well, too. Well, Mr. Handy, the J.M. Handy organization, a lot of us think of in terms of motion pictures. But actually, again, to get to the wider aspect of visual education, won't you tell us a little bit more about the functions of your organization other than just motion pictures?
Well, I believe in motion pictures, but the motion pictures I believe are the motion pictures in people's minds. And the motion picture, as we term it, that is the cinema, is merely a means of putting motion pictures in people's minds. Now, there are many more economical and faster ways of inducing pictures in people's minds than by means of motion pictures. Motion pictures may be more vivid, they may be more specific, they may be more stimulative from an emotional standpoint, they may be more realistic. But if you're dealing with familiar situations and you can talk in terms of the previous experience of the people to whom you were talking, and can make that sufficiently vivid by, well, still pictures or even by words without pictures, it's far more economical.
Of course.
So that only about a third of our work is in motion picture field. The rest is verbal in terms of talks, illustrated talks, yes, and dramatic productions of one kind or another. We produce live shows, and in fact, we are at times the largest employers of theatrical help, should we say,
Yes.
in the country, because at times we have as many as 14 road shows out at one time.
I wonder if I may ask you to do something for me, Mr. Handy. You, on your garment, have no outer pocket. And I'm familiar with why you have your suits tailored without it, but I think it's an interesting story, and I'd like you to share it with our audience.
I don't think I'm peculiar in this, but, well, let's put it this way. Temptation is hard to resist. At least I find it so. And when I had a pocket there, I was inclined to put things in it. It's the easiest pocket to reach with my right hand, with that. So I had a way of putting things there. And they interfered with what I'm most interested in, which is maintaining attention and keeping interest on the thing that you're talking about.
In other words, the concentration on communication, whereas I might be watching your pencils instead of listening carefully and watching you.
Right, and I had particular weakness. Because I used to, on a blackboard or on a chart, as we call it, these turnover charts, I would use green and red and black, and sometimes a fourth color, to emphasize or give special significance to particular points that I was making. Sometimes those are symbolic, such as green for something good to do and red for take it, go slow.
Danger
and that sort of thing. Well, a convenient place to have those pencils so they didn't slow me down in the flow of my conversation or my presentation or communication was in this pocket. Mm-hmm. And they would take attention when I didn't want them to take attention. And so to remove temptation, I had my suits thereafter made without that pocket.
I suppose for similar reasons, I have come to learn of certain wardrobe do's and don'ts that your freelance actors and performers and so forth are asked to cooperate with in Handy productions. Such as, I believe, one time the button-down collar was taboo. I think you discouraged the use of the bow tie when it perhaps was not widely worn. And at one time, I think you would have preferred an actor without a mustache rather than with one. Am I right, sir?
Yes, and that is all based on the same idea. It's difficult to keep your own attention on what you're talking about and stick to the subject, let alone to have your hearers stick to it, and anything that is conspicuous. Now, there may come a time again when, when smooth faces or upper lips are conspicuous. But at that particular time, mustaches were conspicuous and they were distracting. So far as the wardrobe is concerned, we do recommend to speakers, executives, if they have a communication job, we suggest that they have a tie that be not conspicuous. Sometimes it's conspicuous, to have a tie the same color as your suit. In fact, I think we're pretty close to that time now.
Yes.
But I had a fancy at that time, personally, for silk ties, and I had quite a collection, variety of them. I had the experience of talking to a sales executive and presenting to him what I thought was a very good recommendation, suggestion for the solution of the problem. And when I got through, he said to me, "Jam," I was on a first-name acquaintance with him. Well, I think I may say it was no less than Tom Watson, Sr. of the IBM.
Oh.
He said, "Jam, would you mind starting all over again?" I have been so interested in that beautiful tie that you're wearing that I haven't heard a word you've said. Well, I decided that I would leave my colorful home ties at home.
That was the end of your
Yes,
collection.
I had a sofa cushion made out of.
Mr. Handy, I'm very much interested in something, too, that you were obviously a pioneer in, and that was the documentary film. And I know of your attraction to the kind of man that Tom Edison was. And I recall that you had a great deal to do with the presentation of one of the early documentary films on his life, didn't you, sir?
Yes, I learned a great deal from Tom Edison. I wrote a page story on him, one of a series of interviews that I had with business leaders and outstanding personalities of that time, particularly inventors, people of new ideas. Really following up some of these suppressed desires that I'd had at my father's family table when I was an infant. I sold the Tribune on letting me do a series of that kind in which I could ask the questions. I didn't tell them that I hadn't been allowed to ask when I was 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10 from that standpoint.
Well, sure.
So in interviewing Tom Edison, I learned a good deal, and I wanted a third helping. So I went down and to find out what he then considered his greatest invention. And after showing off my previous knowledge, I discovered that it wasn't at all what I thought, that instead of it being the motion picture or the phonograph or the electric light bulb, that he thought his greatest invention was the central service station from which an entire community or city could draw power, electrical current. Well, I dug up a lot of other things that were surprising, and among them was his concept of the motion picture. And I discovered that he had originally intended that invention to be as an educational tool, and that he had envisioned a transformation in our schools. And he was living without that realization of his dream, and suffering as from the disappointment of seeing it being used for entertainment, which at that time, well, times hadn't changed too much, was devoted almost exclusively to love, murder, mystery, crime, and sex that isn't crime exactly, well, that sort of thing, and he was disappointed. So I immediately thought, well, I wonder if I couldn't save this daughter of yours from the life of shame into which the motion picture industry has led her.
And the perils of Pauline.
And all that sort of thing. And why not have some factual films? One of the earliest was a documentary, a life of Thomas Edison.
And as a matter of
fact, in the silent days.
Wasn't Pancho Villa another of your subjects, sir?
Yes, pursuing factual films and looking for some excitements in it, we and using the Tribune to promote them on a participation in the rentals basis, we sent a correspondent down there to talk to Pancho Villa and to get the inside story from him of why he should behave the way he was behaving, how he got that way, and talk to him sympathetically. And he allowed us to take motion pictures. We brought them in and we circulated them in the theaters, and that way broke new ground. We at that time, however, had already pioneered the Selig Tribune News Weekly, which was a presentation of factual material in the theaters. And with the pressure of newspaper publicity, we had demonstrated that people were also interested in the facts of life as well as the facts of life as they, quote, unquote,
yes, unquote,
presented them.
Mr. Handy, you have, during your very, very interesting and colorful and productive years in this business, done so many things. I'd like to ask a question, and I mean not to be a provocative one necessarily, but if you and I were to meet on a train or today possibly in a jet airplane and we got to chatting and I said to you, Mr. Handy, what do you do? How would you describe your occupation?
Well, you might have something entirely new, and I might hear something entirely new. I experimented along that line once. It is a difficult business to describe because we set out to accelerate the processes of education, and we interpret that term very broadly, and also to make them more pleasant. I always loved to learn, but I hated to study. And I thought there might be a lot of other people like that. So I could describe our business in terms of, well, I could just use that phrase. What we do is accelerate education. The chances are I'd get some more questions. I've discovered that. Or I might say our job is to make education painless. That also has the disadvantage of being an interesting statement that leads to another question.
That is an interesting statement because a number of years ago you made one very close to that, I think, when you said that education should be a pleasure and not a pain in the head.
Pain in the head. And it can even become a pain in the neck if you let that headache continue long enough. That's as a matter of fact. Well, I once gave myself the challenge of stating that differently every time.
This question of mine, you mean?
Yes,
someone
short
would ask
question.
you?
What's the business? Giving a different answer each time. At the same time, see that answer was explicit, that it was true, and that it was succinct. And for a whole year, I stuck to that resolution. Every time I had a seatmate on a plane, I fly about 75,000 miles a year, have for, I suppose 30 years. I would give a different answer to that question. I even made the game harder for myself by always asking my seatmate what was his business so that he would have to ask me. And you know that for that entire year, and I suppose I must have answered the question, well, at least 180 times in the 360 days that I was moving around on trains and planes, I gave a different answer every time, and it was a true answer.
Well, of course, I'm not surprised.
Each time.
Mr. Handy, there are so many interesting facets that I want to be sure we at least touch on this afternoon. And you pointed out earlier that you came from a family of 7, and of course I know that Mr. Jamison Handy has a family of his own, but I don't know what it numbers and what these people do, and I'd like to hear a little bit about them.
Well, I have 5 of them, and none of them are in my business, excepting that one of my daughters earns some extra money by teaching in class, elementary school. I have another son who is a business executive. He's been a salesman and a sales manager. I have one who has no use for business. He thinks it's a pain in the neck. And I have I have a daughter who's given me grandchildren.
Wonderful.
And as a matter of fact, a great-grandson.
You're away from home, as you pointed out so much, that I'm told that Mrs. Handy has made up for some of the lost time when you didn't go back to the University of Michigan and has a kind of hobby of her own of going to school.
Well, she likes continuing education, and I think I finally sold her on education. Maybe I didn't. You know, women sell themselves and sometimes can let you think you've contributed to their education. Sincerely, and maybe you have a little bit.
Hope so.
But about 10 years ago, she started going to college. She's slightly my junior, but not very much. And she's been going to college ever since, although she's earned a sabbatical holiday. And she's not going to college this semester, but she's gone to a number of colleges. I am away from home, but she will come and stay with me. There's a commitment. She always keeps it. Any time I stay in the same place, we'll stay in the same place for 2 weeks. That seldom happens. I'm going to be in Detroit all this week, but that puts her pretty well in the clear.
Well,
on the other hand, it interrupts her education. She went to summer school at Columbia one year, and I think it was about an 8-week term, and I complicated things by staying here for a couple of weeks. So out of the 8 weeks, she missed 2, but she succeeded in getting an A. I'm quite proud of that.
I would be indeed.
On a condensed or fast course.